Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It is Thursday. Energy Audit Thursday. Good morning. Good morning. It is Energy Audit Thursday, you guys. Energy Audit Thursday. I'm excited about our conversation on this day. Because we're talking about patterns today. We're talking about patterns. Energy Audit Thursday. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Energy Audit Thursday, you guys. Energy Audit Thursday. I am so excited to have this conversation about the patterns that's keeping us from healing this week. Definitely has been an interesting week, right? Definitely has been an interesting week. But it's Energy Audit Thursday. So we're going to audit some of these energy patterns that is keeping us stuck. You know, what came up in my spirit right before I went to bed, and I wrote a note because I wanted to say this. That I think that a lot of our conversations are in our heads, right? So we're changing a lot in our heads, and but I don't know how much our heart is changing. So I think that we're going to have to start to drop down into our hearts. Our conversation today is all about our minds, right? Our minds. And as I'm talking, I will try to integrate that because as I reviewed the session and what we're going to talk about, right before I went to sleep, I always like pray, meditate, kind of sit still for a minute. And it came up like, yeah, there's a lot of work in our heads, but what about our hearts? And I think that there's a lot of healing that has to take place in our hearts, you guys. So it's Energy Audit Thursday. Before we start, I do have to give this disclaimer that this session is designed to help you identify and understand the patterns that are keeping you stuck. But real transformation, you guys, real transformation happens when you take intentional action. I'm going to say that all the time. Real transformation, real change, real growth. It really happens when you take intentional action. Healing is a process of unlearning old cycles and choosing a new way to move forward. And if you're serious about breaking free, be willing to do the inner work and seek the guidance and support and accountability that really aligns with your growth, you guys. That really aligns with your growth. All right, because it's just important. It's important that we start to seek the help. And again, I do know that in a lot of communities, seeking help is seen as a weakness, and it's seen as something that that is frowned upon. But I think it's time that we start taking our help back. They start sending us to school early. Listen, early to get help, right? Daycare to learn our alphabets and the numbers and things like that. And I think that we owe ourselves some homage to teach us how to be the best version of ourselves that we can be, you guys. So I want to welcome you back to Life Lessons with Dr. Sheila Little. If you're new here, I am Dr. Sheila Little, clinical therapist for 20 years, a doctor of business psychology. And this series is a part of the Project Life Initiative, where we turn theory into practice, you guys. I know we hear a lot of theory, hear a lot of stuff, and we really want to take that and make that an everyday practice, right? So let's breathe. Let's do our breath. Breathe in, self-awareness. We're going to breathe out old cycles, old patterns. So we're going to breathe in some self-awareness, and we're going to breathe out old patterns. This is your time. No pressure, just our presence together. We have already addressed our personal stuff that we need to address in our personal life. And now it's time to come together as a community so that we can get, what we need so that we can move forward on this magnificent Thursday. All right. Before we start, drop a word in the chat. Let me know how you're feeling this morning. Drop a word in the chat. Let me know, how are you feeling on this Thursday morning? I am feeling, we came up as exhausted. And I'm questioning that. Is it exhausted? I think it's just stretch, I do know that maybe this weekend is going to be some time for rest. People typically do things on Saturday. That's typically my day of rest, right? I'm typically just vegged out. So yeah. Okay. So this week we explored the stories that we tell ourselves on Mondays, right? The triggers that arise when we're choosing to heal on Tuesdays, and the obstacles that really keep us stuck, you guys, on Wednesday. And today we're going to dive into the patterns, those hidden cycles that really control our healing journey. So if you've ever found yourself repeating like the same habits, attracting the same type of people, the same type of bosses, or finding yourself in the same type of situations, the same type of arguments, right? On the same, get to the same spot in your healing journey, right? And somehow, you start to kind of step back, you know, or facing just the same struggles. Then I want you to know that this session is for you, because it's actually for individuals who keep falling into the same emotional, relational and behavior patterns, you guys. Those people who are aware of their triggers but still struggle really to break free, of their patterns, right? Similar to being on a hamster wheel, like you're doing things, but you don't really feel like you're doing things, but you don't really feel like you're moving forward. Pep said he feeling offbeat. Okay. Um, Candace said setback. Okay. So it ain't just me, right? It ain't just me, because maybe it's the shift, right? Getting a lot of information, we're growing, we're moving in our lives, right? And this is a part of that that balancing act, right? I always think about water, when it breaks a dam, right? It rushes in really fast, but then what does it do? It subsides again, right? And then it kind of does this thing before it kind of levels off, right? And that's how our healing journey can do. When we break a pattern, when we do something, it's like this rush of energy, right? But, sometimes that level of pressure is like unsustainable. So it has to, in some way, level itself out. Right. Thank you guys for sharing. And it's okay, right? It's okay. So, people who feel stuck. So again, this is for people who feel stuck in repetitive patterns despite wanting to heal. And again, I'm just going to say to the faith-based individuals who want to break generational cycles and align with God's transformation for their life. Okay. um our our powerful quote today is, listen, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and it will call your faith. Listen, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and it will define our faith. Oh, it will direct our lives and we will call it faith. Let me say that right. Until, I told y'all I be saying stuff. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it faith. Now that's powerful. Good morning, Dale. That was by Carl Jung, right? Listen, what does that mean, right? Until we really start to become aware of our patterns, right? Until we really start to become aware of this unconscious, these unconscious behaviors, right? It will direct our life and we will call it fate. We will literally say, I was destined for this, right? I told you guys about how I got diagnosed with daily migraine headaches, right? And I had to go off on the FMLA, and that could have been my fate, right? But it was an unconscious pattern in our family that that this illness will come, in some way take us from life, and then we would get on Social Security benefits and things like that, and I would have called that fate. But we get to write our story, you guys. So that's a powerful quote. Listen, healing isn't just about what happened to us, you guys. It's about the patterns we create in response to what's happening. Okay. So patterns help us grow while others keep us stuck in a cycle of pain, in a cycle of avoidance, in a cycle of self-sabotage, you guys. Right. So here are some of those patterns that interfere with our healing. All right. Thought patterns. All right. The negative self-talk, the limiting beliefs, the overgeneralization, right? Emotional patterns, you guys. Suppression our emotions, like walking away, getting defensive, right? Emotional numbness and this fear of vulnerability, right? Behavioral patterns, avoiding, self-sabotaging, right? Toxic productivity, right? Relationship patterns, you guys, get in our way. When we start to feel codependent or get in codependent relationships, attracting the same type of, and I'm gonna say this softly, toxic people, right? And becoming people pleasers, you guys. Generational and cultural patterns. These are family traumas, cultural beliefs about healing, and things like that that really keep us stuck in this pattern, you guys. And then spiritual patterns, right? Spiritually bypassing guilt-based faith and fear of evolving beyond our righteous teaching, right? Really fear of like even anything that I was taught under this doctrine, like it's the truth and I don't need to know anything else about life, right? These type of patterns really keep us stuck and keep us from really healing and expanding in our life, you guys. All right. So I want you to think about what one pattern you've noticed in your healing journey, and where do you think it started? Right? Where did you think it started? You know, I worked with James, and he grew up in a home where emotions wasn't openly discussed, you guys, and as a result, he learned how to suppress his feelings. Okay. Now, as an adult, whenever conflict arises, James just shut down, right? Or avoids the situation entirely, right? And just kind of will go for weeks without talking about it, right? Hoping that it will what? It will pass. That time will allow this conflict to resolve. All right. He really wants healthy relationships, but finds himself repeating the same avoided patterns, right? Leading to distance and misunderstanding. Even when he commits to doing the inner work, you guys, he tends to fall back on this cycle, right? And in this pattern. Listen, James isn't failing though, you guys. His brain is simply wired for the familiar. All right. His story connects back to the lessons from this week. All right. Monday, James believes that he just don't do emotions. Like, I just don't do emotions, right? So every time he starts to heal and he starts to feel a little vulnerable and he starts to step out and then it gets challenging, right? Because remember, it's going to get harder, right? It's going to be more work, right? To retrain your brain. So it gets a little harder before it gets better, right? So every time it gets a little tough, then he'll just go back to this belief of I don't do emotions. When someone expresses frustrations towards him, it triggers feelings of unworthiness. See, I shouldn't have said anything anyway. Nobody really wants to hear me anyway. You know, I knew this to be true. Good morning, brother. Good morning, Roosevelt. All right. Obstacles, right? His nervous system perceives emotional expression as unsafe, right? Keeping him really stuck in avoidance, right? So every time he goes to feel, he can feel that in his body, right? He can feel that. He gets tensed up. And then what happens? His nervous system goes into flight, freeze, or fawn, right? And he drops back into one of those behaviors, all right? And now we're talking about patterns. Like James really realized that he's repeating a cycle, okay? But now he's choosing to interrupt the pattern and recreate a new response. So if you think about it like I want to say like a slinky or like, okay, you know, your story, and then it really your pattern is a bigger way of being because it's like a collective thing. It's like all of your stories, all of these stories that come together. It's like if you're sorting colors, right? So all your reds go together, all your blues go together, you know, all your whites. Like that creates a pattern of behaviors. And now all the stories around discomfort come together and they create this pattern that makes you what? Resist. That makes you what? Do the thing that you've always done, right? Make you comfortable. So it's like a collection of stories around resistance. And that's why healing is a lifelong journey, you guys, because we have so many stories in our minds. And that's why healing is a manual process, because there's sometimes no way that we can really stop that. When that trigger starts, we have to be aware, like, oh, I'm being triggered, right? Let me pause, let me stop, let me breathe, let me get present, and let me listen, right? Let me listen to what's really being said and not really interpreting it through this old way of thinking, all right? Because when I interpret it through the old way of thinking, I'm actually halting my healing process because I'm really now going to respond from my old way of being. And I'm a new person. So I can respond differently, right? Listen, patterns don't repeat because you're weak or you're broken, right? They repeat because your brain and your body is really wired for the familiar. Healing isn't about willpower, you guys. Healing isn't about willpower. It's about consciously choosing a new response. Okay? This is about being in the manual seat of your life, like literally the driver's seat, and all of this is going on, and then you're taking charge of your life. All right, this means that when you find yourself repeating old patterns, you guys, we're not going to judge that, right? It's not a, but we're going to be aware that this is not a failure. This is an invitation for me to insert the new me, insert the right me, insert the aware me here, right? It's an invitation to really do something different, right? Your body is giving you a chance to really rewrite your script, you guys. um, Candace said, hating to hear things I already know, or is aware of, is a pattern I have to get defensive. Okay, this is good, Candace, right? So hating to hear things that I already know. I always say, like, there's really no, I already know. Okay, what we thank you for sharing this, and I'm not saying this to you, but I think we all do this. Somebody starts to say something, and you could say, I knew they was going to say that. Now part of that can be intuitive, right? Your mind really preparing you for the response. But depending on the story, right, depending on the story that the I already knew this is coming over, is how I'm going to respond, right? Because if I already knew it, so I'm preparing myself to defend myself, right? um then I am going into what? Resistance, right? I'm going into fight, right? So that's still the survival brain. But if I'm like, okay, I already knew what they were going to say, how can I come and respond in a way that is from the new me? Maybe just let them have that, right? Maybe just allow that experience to happen without me becoming defensive. I thank you for sharing it. Candace also said overly thinking or overly explaining. This is another thing that we do, right? This is another pattern that a lot of us have, because we want the connection, because we want the validation. We find ourselves overly explaining ourselves. All right. Thank you for sharing, Candace. All right. So again, healing isn't about willpower. It's about consciously choosing a new response, you guys. This means that when we find ourselves repeating old cycles, it's not failure, you guys. It's really an invitation for us to do something different. Your body is really giving you a chance to really rewrite your script, you guys. It's so powerful, and it's designed in such a beautiful way that it's like, insert new script here. Okay, imagine what it would feel like if you finally broke free of the cycle of having that has been held in your family for years, or that has held you back for years, right? Healing isn't about forcing change, though. It's not about forcing change. It's about really giving yourself permission to evolve and grow, right? It's about making the space for that to happen, which is why we want to practice being present, right? Right? Because what if the patterns you struggle, what if the patterns you struggle with weren't meant to trip you up, right? It wasn't meant to trip you, but it was really meant to teach you, right? It was really meant to make you aware. Like, I'm going to show you this enough times, I'm going to send you through this enough times to really get your attention. Hey, this is something I need you to see it. And so I'm going to continue to show it to you over and over again, so you can make the choice to change it. And every time you recognize that pattern, you guys, you gain power over it. All right. Awareness is the first step to this level of freedom, you guys. I work with someone who always was attracted to emotionally unavailable partners. Always, right? She believed that she just had bad luck, that there was just no good man out there. That man just really needed to mature, right? But once she recognized her pattern of choosing people who reinforced her old wounds, right, she was able to shift. Today, she's in a relationship built on trust and mutual growth, you guys, because she changed her pattern. Listen, again, we're thinking about pattern as a collective consciousness, and as us, as my brain wants to be safe. So if I grew up in an emotionally unavailable home, right, where my parents wasn't available emotionally. Maybe I didn't have the emotional support I need. That's a familiar wound, right? It doesn't feel good, but what that did, that activated what our survival brain. That made us, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more later on, but that made you what? Do stuff, show up, right? Maybe get the good grades, maybe activate yourself, right? In a way so that you can what? Try to attain their emotions. So you built a pattern of baiting, right? Of baiting yourself so that you can be caught. Now you become an adult, right? And now your mind is looking for the same type of river, right? The same type of scene because it knows how to bait, right? This is where I'm proficient at. Whether you like that process or not, that is your brain's defense mechanism. So now is I know how to bait. I don't know how to be different. I don't know how to not overly think. I don't know how to just sit and be present and allow myself to be loved and allow myself to be in receptive mode. I don't know how to be the center of attention, right? I know how to give attention. I know how to fight for attention. I know how to prove my point. I know how to defend myself. And so your life now and your brain is going, your reticular activation system is going to look for spaces where those skills can be experienced because we're safe in this. And again, it's not looking at how you feel about that. It's just saying this is what we're proficient at. We've done this the most. And this is why we have to then become comfortable with the uncomfortable, because now I have to be comfortable with um being the hunted, right? Being the person that's not trying to make things happen. Be the person that's being pursued, right? And not the pursuer. Being the person that's being convinced and not the person that's doing the convincing. If that makes sense, put a 1 in the chat, because I don't think it just happens to women. I think it happens to men too, right? Where we meet unavailable partners or we get into jobs where we're not seen and we think it's out there, but it's really my mind has developed a pattern of work. This is what we're proficient at. We can make this thing work, and life just keeps giving you situations and scenarios where you have to perform in that way. And again, it's not because you like it, it's just because that's what's familiar. Okay. All right. So evidence shows, or studies on neuroplasticity shows that the brain can rewire itself when we intentionally interrupt these patterns, right, and replace them with healthier behaviors. This means that healing is a trainable skill. All right. Neuroplasticity is your ability right now. Your brain has neurons and they're wired like together like this. Neuroplasticity says that, hey, we can actually unwire that and then we can wire it over here to do something different, right? And years ago they didn't think that was possible, but as they study the brain, because they're not experts, right, of this human being, we are the expert of ourselves. Good morning, Raven. um because we are experts of ourselves right now. Our brain, they are learning that our brain can unchange how it used to be. All right. So I want you to think about what one pattern you are ready to break, right? Are you willing to really shift how you see things and how you show up? All right. Put a 2 in the chat if that made sense. All right. So we know that today is Energy Audit Thursday, and we talk about our patterns, right? And patterns are really these cycles, unconscious, that we unconsciously repeat, that really shape our healing journey, right? Why we repeat patterns? Really because the brain prefers familiar discomfort over unfamiliar healing. That's to sum it up. Listen, I prefer, my brain prefers, right, familiar discomfort over unfamiliar healing, right? So when we try to change, the brain will resist it because it sees it as an unknown threat, right? And this is why self-sabotage, this is why avoidance, and this is why fear really shows up during our healing process or when we want to change, right? And then we have to also know that patterns live in our bodies, you guys, not just our minds, right? So unprocessed emotions, they get stored, like I said, in our nervous system through those neuropeptides, right? And these patterns can show up in our physical sensations. So now these neuropeptides or these emotions, right? They've been stored in my body over years because I really haven't processed those. I haven't digested those, right? So now I feel this tightness, this tension, this anxiety, right? And healing really requires us to start to do breath work, right? That's why when we start off, we take conscious breaths, right? So I want to consciously breathe in and consciously breathe out so that good morning, Miss Melissa, so that I can definitely start to be conscious about how my mind is how my body is metabolizing, right? All right. Through movement, through dance and things like that, and through something called grounding. And I don't know if you guys know what grounding is, but grounding is really just where we ground ourselves, right? And consciously ground ourselves into the earth. So it's kind of like I see myself sitting at this table or sitting in front of this computer, but I'm grounding myself into the earth. So I may like grow roots. Like I may imagine like roots are like growing out my feet and like grounding and like securing me to the earth, right? Or I may feel like a waterfall fall off of me down, down, down to the middle of the earth. And as I'm imagining that, I am really feeling my body, right, get present. Or maybe I'm becoming more aware of my body because it's becoming heavier. And we call this grounding, right? Because it's important. And we see this happen in electricity, right? They have what? A grounding wire. Why do they have a grounding wire? So we won't break a circuit. If we have any electricians on here, you can give me more information on that. But this is like the kind of like the same thing. I'm grounding myself in something outside of me, right? All right. So how does your body react? I want you to think about how your body reacts when you try to change deep rooted patterns. I remember when I first started to change my patterns, literally when I started to ground or do anything, like I would jump. Like my body would be so unnatural that I would just have these like involuntary jumps. And I started to go to the doctor, and like I now asked, like, okay, so I'm having these, that nothing was wrong with my brain. What I ended up finding out was that it was like this trauma, like leaving my body, because I started to feel my body again. And so my body would have these unconscious kind of like, and it would only happen in my meditations. All right. So it wasn't like I was doing that everywhere. It was like when I was going to calm down, my body would just jump. All right. Okay. Listen, patterns, whether mental, emotional, behavioral, relational, and even spiritual, listen, they help to shape how we navigate life, you guys. Many of these patterns are truly unconscious, right? They're given to us. They're passed down to us. All right. And this is why we have to have grace for ourselves. This is why we have to be more understanding of who we are and really try not to judge ourselves, because a lot of times our brain was defenseless to the information that it was given when we were younger, and naturally it just absorbed it, right? And so as an adult, when we know better, we do better, but we don't know no better, so we're just doing it, right? We're just doing it because that's what our brain knows to do, right? And so we really have to be more mindful and compassionate about how we respond, how we talk, how we act in these patterns that we have, and not really judge ourselves as stupid, dumb, lazy, weird, like all of these things that we as a third party or as the observer of ourselves looking back at us is like we're becoming like the disciplinary parent, like don't do that. It's kind of like, I don't know, punishing your kid for something that you never really told them about. Like a kid goes to, I don't know, stick their finger in like the socket, and then you whoop them, right? Because you know that socket is harmful for them, but they don't know that it's harmful to them, right? And so you're punishing them for something that they didn't know that you had information about. This is what we do to ourselves because we're older and we're adults and we have experienced something different in our conscious mind. When our subconscious mind does something, or we see these behaviors, it's as if we're punishing ourselves for doing this thing or having this pattern, because our conscious person is aware that that shouldn't be there. But the subconscious mind doesn't know that. This is the information I've been fed like all my life, and I'm just giving it back to you. So that's when we start to, reunite with ourselves, and we're like, okay, where did that come from? Like, where did I learn that from? And now what do I want to do to move forward? If that makes sense, put a 3 in the chat. Put a 3 in the chat. Okay. So here's the thing. Like I said, patterns, whether mental, emotional, behavior, rational, or spiritual, they help to shape how we navigate life. And there are several patterns that really interfere with our healing, right? So I talked about this, our thought patterns. So there's something we call cognitive distortions, all right? Cognitive distortions is truly like a distorted way of how I see life. Good morning, Miss Jackie. Right? So these are automatic negative thoughts that really shape our perception of reality. So this is like all or nothing thinking. And if you fall into one of these categories, I really want you to think about it. Okay. So this is like the all or nothing thinking. If I'm not healing perfectly, then I'm failing, right? It's like if everything ain't going right, then everything was a failure, right? It's kind of like this all or nothing thinking. It's also overgeneralization, right? It's when we say always to everything. Everybody always hurt my feelings. This always happened to me. I've always been hurt, right? So I will always be hurt, right? These are overgeneralizations because it's not true. You're taking a couple of episodes in your life and you're generalizing it. Everybody always lie to me, or everybody lies, or you can't trust nobody, right? Or everything is so hard, right? So when we start using words like everything, always, right? We know that that's a cognitive distortion. That's me brushing this broad brush, right, across my life. And it's just not true because every person is not that way. This doesn't always happen to you. But when we tell ourselves that, when our brain hears that, then it starts to treat everything like that. Okay. Personalization, right? This is when we start to personalize everything. If someone treats me badly, it must be my fault, right? If somebody posts something on social media about, I'm starting my healing process, and I hear somebody post something on social media about people trying to heal, don't know something about their past, I take that personal like they talking to me, and this person may be eight rows away from me, right? Somebody's talking or laughing, and I take that personal. Listen, this is a cognitive distortion, right? Where you personalize everything as about you. And I just want to let you know that everything is not about you, right? People have their own things that they're going through. People have their own stories that they're navigating. People have their own life, and so do you. And when you're around a person who's taking your stuff personal and you know it wasn't about them, that should be a red flag. Like, oh, okay, you know. So this personalization is another cognitive distortion that's keeping us from being able to heal. Minimalization, right? My pain isn't that bad. I should just get over it, right? So we minimize, right? We minimize what we're really going through. We can be feeling, so bad, but we'll minimize it to like, oh, it ain't that bad. I ain't hurt that much, right? We'll minimize our situation, our circumstance. We don't even minimize our dreams, our goals, and aspirations to really not give us that motivation and inspiration that we need to really get to where we need to go. And then catastrophizing, right? If I open up about my wounds, everything will fall apart, right? If I go on this healing journey, all of this stuff is going to happen to me. I'm going to have to spill out all of my pain to this therapist. And right. So this is really catastrophizing, where you're just making it so big to consume, right? But these are all defensive mechanisms that's really stopping us and getting in the way, right? So these thoughts really keep people trapped, listen, in fear, avoidance, and hopelessness, preventing them from really seeing healing as a real possibility for them. And then we have our emotional patterns, you guys. Like I said, the emotional suppression. If I ignore my pain, it will go away. Okay. Emotional numbness, usually work, social media, food, and substances, using food, work, social media, and substances to really avoid our feelings, right? So this emotional numbness, right? Um, Hyper independence. This is a big one. I don't need no help. I can handle this by myself. I don't need nobody to tell me nothing. I'm gonna figure this out on my own. This is a emotional pattern that we fall in, right? Emotional rejection, right? Blaming others, right? Blaming others for emotions we don't want to process. So instead of me taking ownership and accountability, right, I'm pointing a finger, right, at other people It's your fault my feelings hurt. It's my mama's fault that I'm in here. It's my daddy's fault for not showing up. It's my boyfriend's fault. It's all of these things, all of these people thoughts. And so we are emotionally projecting, right? And then over attached to our pain, you guys. So this is another thing, making suffering part of our identity. Do you know some of us really are making suffering and living in suffering, and we've made it a part of our identity, you guys, right? I am my trauma. I am that thing that happened to me, and we will hold on to it, you know. No, you are not your trauma. You are who you are, and you're a person that happened to be traumatized, right? You are who you are, and you're a person that happened to be maybe, whatever the trauma was, molested, raped, hurt, cheated on, right? But you are not that thing, all right? Good morning, Kiaya. All right. Um, unprocessed emotion, unprocessed emotions don't disappear, you guys. They build up and they manifest as anxiety, depression, and physical illness. Healing requires us to feel, not avoid, right? So again, I think that we're trying to do a lot in our heads, but we're not really dropping down in our bodies and feeling this so that we can start to metabolize it and really move it up, move it away, right? These behavior patterns, you guys, are stopping us. They're stopping us, right? So avoidance, skipping therapy, dodging difficult conversation, distracting ourselves from the inner work, right? I'll start that another time. But we avoid so much. We avoid the difficult conversations. You don't know how many people I work with week after week. I'm like, so did you have a conversation yet? Oh, I was working. I'm just trying to wait for the right time. And I have gotten judged, right? Like, do you think it's the right time for this conversation? Well, when is the right time, right? So we have really convinced ourselves that there's a right time to have certain conversations. There's a right time to do things. And truly, it's our sophisticated, beautiful mind creating a pattern of avoidance. Okay. So we really need to become aware of, like, am I really avoiding this? Right? Am I saying, hey, this need to be the right time, but it really don't have anything to do with the time. It's just me feeling some way about having to do this thing. And so I'm gonna avoid it, right? Self-sabotage and really pushing people away, pushing away opportunities, right? That could really help us grow. All right. So we may meet people, we may get an opportunity to grow at our job, we may get a raise, and just the feeling of that level of responsibility, that level of leadership, that level of acknowledgement. It's like, oh, am I ready for that? And so we will unconsciously self-sabotage or consciously self-sabotage. What we call toxic productivity, really filling your schedule and avoiding being alone with your thoughts, right? So either surfing through social media or, doing everything for everybody else. Oh, I just got this busy day. I had to run to do this for mom. I had to do this for my kids. I had to, go and go grocery shopping, right? This is what we call toxic productivity. Because did you really have to do that? Or are you doing that to really avoid being alone with your thoughts and doing the work that you need to do on this healing journey? Repeating coping mechanisms, right? Choosing comfort over growth, really staying in toxic relationships, uh, um, addictive behaviors, right? So this is like repetitive coping mechanisms, right? So this relationship is in some way, even though it's toxic, is in some way comfortable. It's how I cope. It's how I take the pressure off me, because now I can talk about them. All right. Impulsive reactions, right? Really responding from wounds instead of wisdom, lashing out, shutting down, isolating, judging, sarcasm. We see it a lot in sarcasm. Oh, so now you better than me. Oh, so now you know everything, right? This is how we then like bump off what like really dismissing what the other person has to say. That's an impulsive reaction. So now I don't really have to deal with those feelings. All right. Healing really requires intentional action, you guys. But these patterns reinforce avoidance, stagnation, and emotional exhaustion. Kiaya said, I strongly agree. I'm going through some of this, but I'm getting myself help. My dad recently took something out of me, but I'm giving myself time to grieve. But I'm not happy on how things have changed me. I thank you for sharing that, Miss Kiaya. And if you want to discuss that more, you can DM me. But I really thank you for sharing it, because I do think that people, when things happen, it could be this feeling of like, I can't believe that this is happening. And it can feel like that thing took something. It really, this is, we talked about this before, this grieving, right? I had a belief over here, and now I have to experience something different, in trying to reconcile the two. Okay. I thank you for sharing that. All right. Another thing that gets in the way is our relationship patterns, you guys, attracting the same type of relationships. If that's friends, if that's partners, if that's environments, right, that recreate our past wounds. And remember, the brain just wants to do that because it wants information that's familiar, right? And people pleasing, right? Over giving, over explaining as a way of earning love and validation. I think Miss Candace said that. Fear validation. I mean, fear vulnerability, right? Really struggling with trust, opening up, and really expressing our emotions due to our past hurt, you guys. Codependency, relying on others to regulate our emotions, to define our worth. This is codependency. When we say, you make me feel this way, you did that, so I felt this way. It's your fault that, as adults, no. There's a space where you get to choose. Now, subconsciously, right? Because it's a pattern, you may automatically feel that way. And it may appear that that person made you do that, but they didn't. They didn't make you do that. Like, you're making a choice. But if you don't step back, pause, breathe, right, then you're going to continue to be in codependency and blaming others for how you feel. All right. And then we just push people away, really self-isolating, expecting, or expecting rejection, because before it really happens, right? So we push people away. Because we really expect to be rejected, right? And so we reject ourselves before the person can really get the opportunity to. And this can halt our healing process, you guys, right? Um, and then we have the generational and spiritual stuff, right? So generational, just the family trauma, right? Unspoken wounds passed down, like abuse, neglect, addiction, cultural beliefs, right? About healing therapy is for the weak people. You don't need to pray about that, or you just need to pray about that, right? So that cultural belief that if I pray about it, it'll go away, right? A scarcity mindset, right? That fear of growth, this fear of growth due to these generational traumas, right? We could call it survival remorse and things like that. People don't really want to go through that because of this scarcity mentality. I'm gonna talk about what a scarcity mentality is. A scarcity mentality is like, we only got 8 slices of a pizza. Okay, so we got to make this work. A scarcity mentality will only try to make those 8 slices work. Okay, listen. A abundance mentality is, we got 8 slices of pizza, but when we look up, there's more pizzas that we can eat from. So we don't have to make our decisions solely off this 8 slices, right? Because we can go get more pizza. Okay. So that is the growth mentality. That is the abundance mentality. And a lot of us are in scarcity because we only looking at what we have, and we're trying to make our life work off of the resources we have, the income we have coming in right now, our current relationship, right? Our current life. And so we're like, okay, how can I change? How can I pay this $47? I only got this amount of money coming in. Now, how can I have the life of my dreams when, my partner is like this? That's a very scarcity mindset, because you're only looking at what you have. And you're not looking up and saying that life will adjust to my needs. So if I'm choosing to pay this $47, or I'm choosing to change, the dynamic will change and life will meet me where I'm at. And then we have to change that in our belief. Okay. Religious conditioning, right? So toxic faith-based narratives like suffering makes me more worthy, right? There is a lot of toxic faith-based narratives that's keeping us from healing, you guys, right? Emotional repression of families, right? We don't talk about feelings in our house, right? We don't talk about that type of stuff. Get out of here with that. These things really can stop our healing process, halt our healing process, or really make us feel like we don't even need to heal because it's historical, right? It's environmental. This is what I know, right? So breaking these generational patterns really requires us to have like a conscious effort and unlearn what we have normalized in our childhood, you guys. Okay, so spiritual patterns, right? So spiritually bypassing, which means that we're using our faith to avoid our emotions instead of confronting them. God will fix it, so I don't have to do anything. That is why I bring in biblical principles, and then that's why I make the principles practical to you guys, because God has already done in a lot of times what He's going to do. He has already put the seed in you. He has already put the desires in you. He has already created the mechanism in your body that if you do something, it will activate. Okay. So faith in a sense, right? So when I have faith and I do the work and I make the dreams and and I extend that faith, what I'm actually doing is I'm feeding my brain, the brain that God gave me, images, beliefs, and words. And because my brain was created to provide me with what I want, right? Because my brain is designed to do that. The faith is that I'm going to see this thing before I see it, because now I want my brain to understand this is what I want, and long enough to allow me to start to see it, right? So having faith in something is really using your body in a way where it can produce for you the thing that it was created to produce, not just this continue. Because we have, like I said, we have faith in our unbelief. We have faith in in things going wrong, and then they go wrong. Right? So why not have faith in things going right, and showing and speaking in that way, right? So your brain now can shift that way too, right? Perfectionism and faith, really believing that struggling means that you lack faith, right? That if I'm some way struggling, having some anxieties, having some fears, having some doubts or something like that, that in some way that I'm lacking faith. No, your brain is designed for survival. So a lot of times just your ability to change your circumstance is going to create some emotions in you, right? So this whole perfectionism and faith is just not true, right? Now, when I become aware of that, I can use a Bible scripture like, okay, I can count this all joy, or that everything is working for my good, or I can breathe my way through that process, right? Guilt and shame based faith beliefs, right? Feeling unworthy of healing because of past choices, right? Because I'm a sinner, I'm unworthy of a beautiful life. I'm unworthy of a great spouse. I'm unworthy because I've, not been good, because I haven't tithed, because I didn't do good in that peak season of my life before. you know, I'm undeserving of another peak season in my life, right? So this is shame and really guilt around that, right? Avoiding inner work in favor of external rituals, right? Really focusing on religious arts like praying and fasting, but really ignoring, right, this emotional work, right? So I feel like if I fast and I pray, then I pray and everything should work together. And it's like, no, then you got to do some work. Now you got to feel. Now you got to open up your heart. Now you got to start trusting, right? Right? This is important to our healing, right? Fear of outgrowing religious spaces, right? Really feeling guilty about evolving past the teaching and spiritual community that once guided you as a youth, and even as an adult. All right. True healing happens when faith and personal responsibilities, you guys, really work together. Listen, healing is about erasing patterns. It's about recognizing and reshaping them into healthier alternatives. So instead of suppressing, right, learn emotional regulation. Instead of avoidance, listen, lean into healing with small steps. Instead of repeating toxic cycles, you guys, choose different responses. And instead of hyper independence, accept support and connection. All right. And I want you to think about, what pattern have you noticed on your healing journey? And how would your life change if you replace that pattern with a healthier thought? All right. Okay. All right. Because awareness is key. All right. Many people don't realize that they're stuck in a pattern because the patterns feel so normal, right? Because the patterns feel so normal, right? So what is one habit or reaction you've repeated in different situations? All right. All right. And then most patterns are rooted in deeper beliefs, right? Many that was formed in our childhood, right? So someone who's struggling with emotional suppression may have been raised to believe that showing emotions makes them weak, right? And then we have this brain's role, right? Patterns don't just exist by habit. They exist because our brain processes pain in safety, right? So the brain prefers familiar discomfort really over unfamiliar healing. And so when we try to change, our brain really resists it because it sees that as an unknown, that it sees that unknown healing as a threat. And you're going to hear me say that over and over again. All right. So when we try to change, our brain will resist it. And this is why we self-sabotage. This is why we avoid, and this is why we fear. But now that I know that, I don't have to judge it. I can just become aware of that. I can get neutral. I can breathe. I can accept that as a part of my journey, as a part of my growth, right? And then keep it moving and not stop. All right. All right. And then listen, this resistance that I'm talking about, it's normal. It's normal. It's so normal. Okay. And we have to start making it normal, right? Because many people think struggling equals failure. And it just doesn't mean that. But guess where we got that from? When we struggled when we were younger, we were made to feel like we failed, right? We got 2-3 times maybe to learn how to ride our bike. And if we didn't, right, you don't know how to ride a bike, or you got teased for that for the rest of your life or something like that, right? So when we were younger, if you had one time to take the math test on Friday. So my teacher gonna teach me about math Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you get a test, right? If you don't know everything I taught you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you failed, right? So in a sense, right, we've been programmed to really think that struggle is failure. And it's not. It's a learning curve. It's a phase. It's really like this phase of your brain trying to rewire itself and reconnect itself. And that takes time, you guys. It just takes time, right? Your brain is really learning. It's really learning a new way of me. So I'm gonna encourage you to just keep going. Okay, keep going. All right. And then we also have the emotional and physical patterns, right? This is really our connection between our bodies, right? Patterns don't just live in our minds. Like I said, they live in our bodies. So someone who suppresses emotions might notice tightness in their chest, right? When they feel vulnerable, right? You may see their hands clench up, right? Tightness, right? Some people may feel this knot in their throat, right? Right. Some people may feel it in their stomach, where it feel like, they get some anxiety in their stomach. They may have to go to the bathroom or feel like they have to go to the bathroom, right? These are all emotions in our bodies, you guys. So someone who has a pattern of people pleasing, in a sense, may feel anxiety about setting boundaries, right? May feel like some anxiousness in their stomach about communicating their needs, right? And so we need to know that on our healing journey, when we get back into our emotions, right, that these physical sensations can be a pattern that we need to break. What we're saying about it, right? Is we should in some way, I got this knot in my throat. I got this heaviness in my chest. I don't have to fear that and resist that. I can embrace that as a part, like, oh, I have been working on myself, right? And then we can do some what's called somatic healing. We talked about that on Monday, where we do breath works, where we breathe, we move, right? And do these grounded techniques. All right. All right. If that made sense, okay, put a 5 in the chat for me. All right. I'm going to move on to our biblical wisdom, you guys, our biblical wisdom. Okay. So Romans 12:2. Romans 12:2. Before I do that, I want to say that I do want to say this. How do we a simple way of disrupting our old pattern and replacing a new one is really just taking like one small step. Okay? Really just taking one small step. So I'm going to ask you, what is one way you can respond differently the next time patterns show up, either in your body, in your family, with your kids, in a relationship, right? In these ways, right? Where you can see them, recognize, oh, that's a pattern, right? And so I can respond differently now. All right. Right. So breaking patterns through faith. Okay, that's our biblical wisdom. So Romans 12:5 says, do not conform to the patterns of the world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of our minds, you guys, or be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. What does this mean? Transformation starts internally before it manifests externally. Okay. Healing requires a renewing your old thought patterns and stepping into a new mindset, you guys. Do not conform of the patterns of the world. I just went over the patterns, some of the patterns of the world, right? Now, again, I'm making this scripture very practical. So because I know that when I've heard this scripture, and guess what? It may even be what the Bible said meant the scripture to be. When we think about the patterns of the world, guess what world we're thinking about? We're thinking about the world outside of us. We're thinking about the government world. We're thinking about the educational world. We're thinking about the financial world. But I just told you 5 worlds, right? That you have developed patterns in, right? Let me go back over it. Your thought pattern, that's a world of its own. So be not conform to the patterns of of the world of your thoughts, right? Because those thoughts don't belong to you. Do not be conform to the patterns of your emotional patterns, right? These emotional patterns, right? Because those developed as a defense mechanism to protect you when you were younger. And I designed you in a way to really help you to be safe in those environments that I sent you in a sense. All right. So do not be conformed to the emotional patterns that you have developed. Do not be conformed to the behavior, the daily habits that you have developed. Do not be conformed to the relationship patterns, right? How you have connected to others in the past. Okay. Do not be conformed to the generational and cultural patterns, right? Of your race, your gender, your ethnicity that you understand as a part of you, of that identity. Do not be conformed to the spiritual patterns, right? These spiritual biases and perfectionism and things like that, right? Right? Do not be conformed to the beliefs and to your body and to these emotional and physical these sensations that we have in our bodies, right? Do not conform to the patterns of those worlds, right? But be ye transformed from the renewing of your mind, right? The renewing of your mind means that I'm going to take on a new mindset where I'm present, right? And I'm not going to allow those old patterns, those old thoughts, I'm not going to allow that to determine how I show up today. So this verse really reminds us that healing begins in our minds, you guys, and these patterns, the patterns we struggle with, negative self-talk, avoidance, toxic relationships, self-sabotage, generational curses, emotional baggage, all of those things are often conditions from our past experiences, cultures, and even family cycles, right? So the transformation is a process of unlearning that stuff, right? And replacing these old ways of being that I was taught or that I caught, right? And living in these new ones, right? And letting life, right, give me new ones as it's showing up, right? How does this verse really relate to today's session? No, this session is about breaking old cycles and stepping into new ways of thinking, reacting, and living, right? And when we say this is just who I am, guess what you just did? You just conformed to a pattern. I don't do that. You just conform to a pattern. And because we are divine beings, we know as divine beings what we transcend limitations, right? We are here to transcend limitations. So whenever we identify with anything that is not in our best interest, right, in our growth, then we are conforming to that thing. I just don't do that. That's just not me. I know I should talk, but that's just all of that is conforming, right? So we have to pause, we have to reflect, and we have to choose new responses and then begin this process of transformation. All right. Listen, the God within me, the God within you renews our minds daily, you guys, not from this place of external pressures, but from this internal awakening, right? Healing is not about striving, you guys, right? Healing is not about striving. It's about allowing the transformation to take place within us. How do I know this to be true? So God renews your mind daily. Let me tell you, let me make this very practical. All right. Do you know we have something called synapse? Right? These synapses. And when synapses, when we learn something new or have a novel experience, our brain really forms these new synapse connections, right? And we get them. We get this opportunity every day or every week or every year, right? Where we get like this opportunity, these new synapses to store new information on, right? The longevity of these new synapses depend on how we use them and if we use them. When we actively engage and reinforce the connections of what we learn today, right, then we stabilize those, right? But when we don't, we lose it. So this is where that use it or lose it term come from, that principle, right? Because when we're regularly engaging our mind, when we're reading, when we're listening to things like Project Life or any other podcast, and we're taking notes and then we're applying that information, right? We are renewing who we are right in the moment. And God created that ability in us already by giving us these new synapses that we can store new information on. So this is why I'm saying, like, we're not really rewriting these old synapses. They're going to be there. We get an opportunity to have new synapses that come in our brain that we can download new information on. It's kind of like taking a new drive, and it's not, back in the day we used to put the tape player in, right? You used to take the cassette tape, used to put it in, and then you used to press record and play, and then we would record over, right, the old tape. If anybody know what I'm talking about, put a 6 in the chat, right? Me and my brother did this all the time, right? So we had a tape, and it's like, or even your VCR, right? We're going to record over that, right? So this is how we think. This is our thinking of our mind. Like, I want to record over that memory. I want to record over that. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. You actually get new synapses, right? So you get a new space to store new information. But if you don't use that new space in your brain to store this new information, to really do this activity, to take a note, to have a conversation directly after this session about what you learned, to tell the brain, I want to store this in my long-term memory, to see it, to apply it, then it will go away. And then you will only have what? The old information that you've had, right? I hope that made sense. That made sense in my mind. I think that was a good thing. So when we say that, God, be ye transformed, do not be transformed by the patterns of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. God has actually designed your brain to give you these new synapses, to put new information in your mind, and that is ever growing. That is the ever growing process of God. My 86-year-old grandma still getting them. My 76-year-old dad, 75 or 75, I don't know, he's still getting them. So we're not outgrowing these synapses that we get in our health, in our mental health. All right. If that makes sense, put a heart in the chat for me. All right. Then we have our promise verse, right? Our promise verse is, see, this is Isaiah 43:19. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? Right? See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? Right? This is Isaiah 43:19. Why did I put this? Because God is constantly inviting you for growth. He's constantly inviting you into growth and transformation. But we must be willing to let go of the old patterns and receive it and see it, right? So see, I am doing this new thing. I am doing this new thing. Now it's springing up. Do you see it? Do you perceive it? Right? Do you not perceive it? Right? So much is happening. God is doing so much in our life that we're not even perceiving. Guess what? Because we're paying attention to the old. Because our focus is on what we don't want. Our focus is on our pain. Our focus is on who we don't want to be, right? And it's like, no, we got to shift to who we want to be. We got to get some gratitude in here, and we got to start looking for the blessing, because it's there. It's always been there, and it always will be there. Now you get to choose if that's what you want. Okay. That you get to choose if that's what you want. All right. So what this means again is that God is inviting us to really into growth and transformation, you guys. We must be willing to let go of our old patterns to really receive this new. Okay. What this means for our healing is God is always in the process of renewing, restoring, and creating something new in us. I just told you about those synapses, and there's so many other things that we get new cells, right? We shed old skin, right? We have a digestive system. We eat and we get rid of the stuff that we used to. We burn fat, right? We use our fat to burn. It's so many mechanisms within our body where God is showing us that He designed us for renewal, restoring, and creating something new within us. So this is not about this guy in the sky. This is about our by design, right? So the challenge is whether the challenge isn't whether this new thing is happening in us every day, all day. The challenge is whether we're ready to embrace it, whether we're ready to see it. Okay, that's the challenge. Like, am I willing to recognize that, you know, that my cells die off and I get new cells that I can program, that I have these synapses that I can put new information on if I really want my life to change. And then sit with that feeling right there that you just felt, that feeling of overwhelm, maybe a little bit of fear, maybe a little bit of anxiety, and let yourself know that you still safe and that it's okay. It's okay for you to step and be different and grow and experience something new. Okay? Because you deserve it. You deserve it. Okay? How this uh how this verse really attached to this session is that this session really was about recognizing when we are stuck in our old patterns and choosing to shift, right? Sometimes we resist healing because it feels unfamiliar, right? Sometimes we cling to the old version of ourselves because they feel safe. And guess why they feel safe? Because other people accept that version of me. Have you ever, you know, a lot of people don't even like coming home, right? Because they know when they come home, maybe the new version of them won't be accepted. And so either they have to change, right? To adapt to the old, the who they family wanted them to be or saw them as, or they have to feel that uncomfortableness for a minute, right? And so they avoid coming home altogether, right? But newness is already happening, you guys. Our job is to really open our eyes to it and really step into it. These things are real, you guys. Like clinging to the old version of ourselves, that's real, right? We want that. Like I don't. And then we also had a story of being sold out, right? We have these narratives of like being sold out, and especially if you grew up in a community like mine's, right? It's like, it's kind of like a reward to, have a sense of grit and hustle and grind to you. But guess what? That ain't going nowhere. I just told you that ain't going nowhere in your mind. But we can expand. We can grow beyond that. I can have a hustle and grind. I can have the articulation and fine, right? I can have a hustle and grind in me, and then I can learn how to articulate myself and heal. I can get gritty, but I can know how to handle myself too, right? We just don't want to be conformed to one way of being because that's who we always been. We can create a space where I can have a mindful conversation. I can, I can engage with you in a way, in a healthy way, right? I just don't have to be this one way. And we sometimes clinch to that one way because we have identified with it so much, in our life, and we have a fear of being judged and just scared of what that would look like. And I'm just saying, hey, it's going to be a beautiful experience. And guess what? You're experiencing pain now, right? You're experiencing uncomfortability now. And guess what? You're going to experience uncomfortability in that space too, because that's life, but you will have the duality. You will have more choice. You will have more variation, right? You will have a better palate. When you say palate, like you can smell different fragrances, right? You will just have a different experience, and life will start to really shift in a way that serves you. All right. And the practical application of this verse is that the God within me, the God within us is always inviting us to grow, right? Healing is not about waiting for this external miracle to happen, right? It's really about partnering with God's renewal, with the creator of all things renewal process, right? Renewal power that's already inside us to really release these old cycles and embrace what a new way of living. We about to come up on spring right now. The leaves that was on this tree that's outside this house last year, they're no longer there. But new leaves are gonna come by design, right? The tree is still the tree, but the leaves are different, right? So we got to be willing to shed our old leaves with the knowledge that, but I'm still here. That tree's still there. It's just new leaves, right? And we got to be willing to let go of some behaviors, let go of some ways with the belief that some new things are going to come, and I'm going to let go of that too. And that's the healing part of life, you guys. Listen, research has proven that the human brain exhibits remarkable plasticity, meaning this rewiring, continually forming and eliminating synapses, right? Connecting between neurons throughout this life. So research is showing that the brain is constantly getting rid of information and collecting information, right? This dynamic process is critical to our learning, you guys, to our memory, right? And to our overall cognitive functioning. And when we can apply it, our healing journey, when we know that, then our story can change. When our story changes, guess what? What triggers in us changes. When what triggers in us changes, guess what? We can turn mountains into molehills, right? Because we don't face the same obstacles. And when we can turn those mountains into molehills, we will develop the strength and the trust that we need to really break these patterns, you guys, right? And then we can deal with that inner critic that we're going to talk about tomorrow. All right. All right. If that makes sense, if you like that, put a 6 in the chat for me. All right. So today's transformational tool. Again, same one, just recognizing our patterns, right? So we're gonna pause. We're gonna recognize our patterns today. All right. We're gonna reframe them, right? So we're gonna shift the perspective. So instead of saying this always happened to me, we're gonna look for those, remember those cognitive distortions, the all or nothing thinking, the generalizations, right? We're going to look for those type of patterns, right? And then we're going to stop it, right? So this is a familiar pattern, and I have the power to respond differently, okay? And then we're going to choose a different response, which is pause and breathe. Pause and breathe. If anything, I really want to do this year with you guys is to really teach us how to consciously breathe. Just pause and breathe. All right. Journal about your emotions instead of suppressing them. You know, you can always DM. You can join that Project Life. You know, we talk about that every Thursday in this conversation, right? And then make one small choice to really break free. Okay. Our affirmation for today is I am not. I am not. I am not bound by my past patterns. I have the power to create new healthy cycles. I release what no longer serves me and step into a future full of growth, wisdom, and transformation. Growth, wisdom, and transformation, you guys. Okay. The intention, remember, this is for our language. We know an affirmation truly works when we can believe it. So if you read that, I am not bound by my past, and you kind of felt some resistance in your body, your chest got tight, your inner critic said, yes, we are. You know, she don't know what she's talking about. That's just showing that that's not a belief that you have, right? And that's what we need to do the work, right? So these are really truly used to help us to become aware, because you do have the power to create new and healthy cycles, but you have to believe that, right? You can release what no longer serves you, but you have to believe that, and you can step into a future full of growth, wisdom, and transformation, but you won't if you don't believe it, you guys. And that's the work, right? That's that using those new synapses to download new information, to download new beliefs, to eventually sit in that, right? Build habits around that so that now we have, I don't even want to say like, we have leverage. We have leverage against this old mind, which I'm going to talk about tomorrow. Okay. All right. So our intention for today, I will be mindful of my patterns. I will recognize when old cycles try to pull me back, and I will choose to respond. Choose a response that aligns in my healing or from my healed self. All right. Our bonus challenge for the next 24 hours. Listen, when you notice yourself repeating an old habit or reaction, please pause and choose a new response. All right. And if you want to come back to this thread, drop your biggest realization in the comment. All right. Listen, you already know what to do. If this session helped you shift your perspective on your patterns of healing, Drop a fire in the chat for me. And remember, if you can shape it in your mind, you guys, we can have it in our lives. All right. So if you can shape it in your minds, you can have it in your life. Remember to subscribe to those YouTube channels. Right, I am Shaping Solutions. On my YouTube channel, you can get all my Elevated Life podcasts. You can get the What My Daddy Say show podcast, and things like that. I do want to bring that show back, and things like that. So, subscribe, right? And then you get notifications for whenever I come. Make sure you invite a friend. Listen, I'm going to show y'all how to invite a friend. Go up on your screen and it says, do you want to invite somebody to this group? And just click some people that you think would be, that would benefit from this group. Yeah, and I thank the people who have been inviting people into the group. I thank you so much. All right. Know that knowledge alone won't change your life. Actions will, right? So it's about our intention. So imagine having personalized guidance, real accountability, and a supportive community to really help you with what you've learned. So inside Project Life, where we turn theory into practice, right? You get the coaching, the tools, the strategies to really move past your obstacles and really step into your transformation. Your healing journey doesn't have to be, listen, a solo mission. So join that Project Life membership. It's $47. Starts at $47 a month, and that's at SheilaLittle.com/life. I love you guys. I'll see you tomorrow. For who told you that? That voice in your head. Is it your friend or your foe? I love you. I'll see you tomorrow for that session. Till later. Thank you for the fire. Thank you, Kiaya. Thank you, guys. Miss Jackie said, I don't have a fire emoji. I'm just going to say it's fire. Thank you, Miss Jackie. Thank you, Melissa. All right, you guys have a great rest of your day. I love you. Till later. God bless you too, Miss Melissa.